Good afternoon, Polly, and good afternoon to your viewers. We certainly hope so. Stage 4 is fairly high, and it indicates that the system is, it needs some space to breathe. It means that we are not coping. So we are hoping that it will be the highest that we will see. You've seen that we have now reduced it. We are now on stage 1, and we're looking at the forecast for next week. Hopefully, we will not have to go on load shedding next week.
Yeah. So stage 6, completely avoidable this winter season, you think?
We would like to believe so, Polly, but again, I think we need to stress we are short of capacity. We certainly are short of capacity as a country, and we're doing all we can as Eskom. I do believe that there is a lot more that we can do to improve our availability. We are working hard on doing that. So we are working hard on avoiding stage 6. We know the pain that it brings to the country. So that's what we are trying to do.
Yeah. City Press, that's the newspaper, Mr. Dukashe, weekend newspaper. They are reporting today that on average, Eskom's power plants, there's about 24% of this fleet that is basically out of operation as a result of unforeseen problems. I'd like for you to just explain the unforeseen problems for us in plain language. What exactly happens?
So Polly, these are breakdowns that we would experience from time to time. And then the figure of 24%, by the way, is accurate. That's a year-to-date figure of what we would call UCLF, unplanned capability loss factor. So it's when a unit is not able to generate electricity and it is unplanned. So it's not on planned maintenance. Now, various contributors to that is we would take a unit on an outage and we would say the outage starts on that date. The outage is a planned maintenance. It starts on that date and it will end on that date. Excuse me. And if we then go past the planned end date, then that is unplanned. So it contributes to the figure of 24%. We would also have unscheduled or breakdowns where the plant is off, it just comes off, it trips, or we have to shut down because of safety issues or because a part, a component has failed and we cannot continue to run the plant. So that's what happens when the plant is not available and it is unscheduled or unplanned to be unavailable.
Mr. Dukashe, let me take you back to last year at the beginning of the hard lockdown. Eskom committed to ramping up maintenance. A simple question to you, how much reliable maintenance were you able to do last year?
So we measure this as a percentage, in terms of availability, how much time we dedicate to maintenance. So the figure for last year was around 13%. So that part of it was due to the short-term maintenance that we do or that we did during the hard lockdown. Now, Polly, I must just explain, in terms of maintenance, in order for you to be effective in that maintenance, you have to plan it. And planning maintenance takes up to 24 months because you have to scope it. And at some stage, you may have to shut down the unit for a few days and do inspections and verify that the scope that the engineers have come up with is adequate. It's going to address your issues. You take measurements and then you finish the scoping. And then you start the commercial process of placing contracts, making sure resources are available. So that period takes 24 months. So although we were able to gain some benefit during the hard lockdown of last year, but as you can imagine, that was short-term maintenance. So, for instance, long lead spares, plant components that we have to order, some of them overseas, we would not have been able to do during that time. However, it is to do some of the short-term maintenance that is also needed on our plants.
Talking about maintenance, Mr. Dukashe, the Kubek nuclear plant, it has had to shut down recently for maintenance work. But something slightly strange happened, and that is that you suspended the top manager at that plant. And my understanding is this was as a result of non-performance, I should say. What should we read into that drastic action?
Probably, I would say not much until the full process has been completed. I think the action that was taken is there has been, and it's not just during the shutdown, there has been consistent concern about the performance of Kuber. Kuber, it's a significant plant, it's a huge plant, so we certainly would like to make sure that it is available. It's the only nuclear plant that we have, so safety requirements are also high. So there has been some unhappiness, concern about performance of Kuber. So the action that has been taken, it's really just to investigate and look more as to what has gone wrong. What are the things that perhaps we are not doing correctly at Kuber? So it's not to say that the plant manager or the power station manager is guilty of anything, but it's just to look at what has gone wrong during this period. Are there any deficiencies that we need to correct? And so that is the action that has been taken.
So in this action of suspending the manager at the Kuber nuclear plant, are you saying that it is not an indication of what perhaps Eskom should be doing the country over in as far as its plants and maintenance work is concerned?
Totally sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question.
All right, the question simply is, should you not be replicating the exact same measures, the drastic measure of suspending a top official at Kuber? Are you not concerned that perhaps this could be what resolves this issue of underperforming plants? Yes, we know that they're old, but once you've conducted maintenance work, surely they should be in good working condition for some time before they break down again. So I'm simply saying the action of suspending a top manager at the Kuber nuclear plant, should that action not be replicated in other power plants of Eskom?
Thanks. I do understand the question. That is something that we're looking at. The issue of leadership, it's one of those things because, as you say correctly, the system is constrained. We don't have enough capacity. However, as I said earlier, I believe there is still a lot more that we can do to improve our availability. And the issue of leadership, it plays a major role into that. I personally am driving that leaders take correct action. And where action is not correct or it deviates from the expectations, then we do take action. So there have been some actions that have been taken, not necessarily at the power plant or power station manager level, but at various levels where we find that, for instance, maintenance, engineering manager or operating manager has done something wrong or did not display the characteristics that we expect of him. And two things that I'm driving, for me, it's vigilance and a sense of urgency. Now, if there is a deviation in terms of those expectations, then certainly action will be taken. And action has been taken on a number of cases. And we will continue. Where there are plant failures, we will continue to look at, what is the culpability? Is there any action that should be taken? So that is not something that we will shy away from.
All right. Well, that's a very strong statement and a warning, I suppose, to the Eskom managers at the various Eskom power plants. Mr. Dukashe, let me ask you to just remain where you are. We're going to take a short breather because when we return, I want to talk to you about the latest announcement by the president that companies can now start generating their own power upwards of 100 megawatt. This has been said that it is going to affect your bottom line as a person who heads the generation division. By how much? That's the question that I'm going to ask Mr. Dukashe in a moment. You're watching Politics Unscripted, and I am in conversation with Eskom's group executive for the generation division, Phillip Dukashe, who talks to us from Johannesburg. Mr. Dukashe, thanks very much for staying with us. I want to continue the conversation, but pick up briefly before I move on from the subject we were speaking about, and that is of load shedding. The analysts, they are predicting that before the 2 years that it is anticipated we are going to get supplementary power or new power, if you like, as a result of the president's announcement this past week, it's going to be a very rough time for Eskom, and they are predicting that the power utility is likely to see significantly more load shedding than we have ever seen before. Are those predictions correct?
So, probably, yeah, it's difficult. I would not go against those predictions. I think, as we have said consistently, we need additional capacity, and that, unfortunately, it should have happened 3-4 years ago. At this stage, we believe that we need an additional 4,000 megawatts of capacity. That will enable us to have more chance to do our own maintenance and not to fall behind on our maintenance, and it will allow us room to do that. So the longer you delay then the deployment of additional capacity, the more challenging the situation will be. And we're trying to do the best that we can during that period. We are ramping up in terms of our performance, also in terms of our maintenance, where we find opportunities. So it's not going to be an easy time. That I can say for sure, because we are already behind in terms of where we should be for additional capacity.
Let's then move on to the announcement by the President, Mr. Dukashe. The President basically telling the nation that companies are going to be allowed to generate their own power. And the suggestions are that if you read newspapers today, many companies have plans to build their own power plants whose excess power can actually even be given back to Eskom to be fed into the grid. So that decision, though, is predicted to have a very severe impact on your balance sheet as the person who leads the generation division. How badly do you anticipate this latest move to affect your division specifically?
So, firstly, I must say that we welcome that announcement because it is good for the country. It will alleviate some of the shortages that we have at the moment. And as to how much the impact will be, that is difficult to say because we don't know what the uptake will be. So it depends on that as well. But we firmly believe that there will always be room for Eskom to produce electricity, to sell electricity. We firmly believe that there will always be a need for Eskom. But it will be difficult at this stage to say for sure that that is a total impact. That will largely depend on the uptake from industry.
Yeah, some people viewing the latest move by government, Mr. Dukashe, on this issue of giving private companies the ability to generate their own power, they suggesting that this essentially is the beginning of the end for Eskom. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. As I said, I firmly believe that there will always be room for Eskom. The IRP, it was published and it will still continue to be refined. This is now the integrated resource plan that outlines what capacity is needed. Now, as Eskom, we firmly believe we have a role to play even going forward in the IRP. So we are looking, for instance, we have power stations now that are coming to the end of their lives. Now, we have a lot of infrastructure that can still be used at those power stations. I think it would be foolish to just ignore that infrastructure and move on elsewhere. And we do believe that that gives Eskom an edge in terms of anybody else that wants to produce power in the country. So we have started a process of looking at how we can repurpose these power stations or repower them using different sources of electricity, because the infrastructure for electricity evacuation is there. It's already in place. And it will assist greatly. Even if you were to say you're going to use solar there, you're going to use wind or other forms of energy. So we do believe that infrastructure that already exists, it gives Eskom a huge advantage to continue generating electricity for the country. So no, we do not believe it's the beginning of the end for Eskom.
All right. So while Minister Mandashe then works on publishing the legislative amendments that are going to allow these companies to generate their own power, how well prepared are you as Eskom in helping these companies meet the technical requirements that are there for them to connect to the national power grid?
So, Collie, that's something that has already happened. I mean, we have IPPs, independent power producers in the country, and they produce their electricity, but they connect into the transmission system of Eskom. And as Eskom, we've had that obligation to connect them, and they will tell us these are the dates, these are the megawatts, and then we'll make sure that they can be connected. So it will not be any different to anybody else that comes and wants to produce electricity. We do understand that at this stage, I mean, it cannot happen that you duplicate the transmission and the distribution network. So it will remain, and they will feed into the system. And I think as Eskom, there is not much work to be done to prepare for that, because a lot of the work has already been done. A lot of this has already occurred.
Mr. Dukashe, if my memory serves me well, in 2016, you were assigned to go and fix the problems at Medupi. 5 years on, Medupi is still not fully operational. Why is that?
Yes. So at that stage, when I went to Medupi was it had one unit on commercial operation. It's got 6 units, and currently it's got 5 units on full commercial operation. The last unit is undergoing final tests, and in the coming months, it should go commercial. So I think significant progress was made in terms of fixing or finishing the construction. And obviously, I mean, there were at some stage 15,000 employees working at Medupi. So with all of that, significant progress was made. And to a large extent, Medupi is producing. Yes, there are design defects that need to be fixed. And we are working towards fixing those, obviously, with the contractors that are concerned. But Medupi, in the coming months, it should be fully commercial with all 6 units operating.
By when?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. There is just one challenge that we are dealing with, which is on the center line, and there are some tests that need to be done. My rough estimate would be to say definitely within the coming 6 months, all units at Medupi should be in commercial operation. This unit, by the way, which is Unit 1, it's generating electricity, it is running, and it's a major contributor to the grid. However, there are certain requirements that it needs to meet before it can go commercial. So it is running, it's generating electricity, but we just want to make sure that it meets all the requirements. And it is compliant to the grid code.
All right. As we wrap up our conversation, Mr. Dukashe, I'd like to talk about the car power ships deal. And I'm not going to throw you into the controversy here, but simply what I would like to gather from you is that now that that deal is hobbled by the court action, that particular car power ships deal is meant to give the country the emergency power that it needs right now to try and fix, I guess, the load shedding issue on the one hand. But on the other, while that is happening in the courts, how is it affecting Eskom in terms of supplementary power?
So again, Collie, the sooner we can have additional capacity or additional power, I think the better it will be for the consumers and for the whole of South Africa. So the longer it is delayed, the more pain I think we as Eskom will see. And as I said, we will do our best to minimize load shedding, to minimize plant unavailability. But I think, as we've said consistently, we cannot say for sure that it will not happen. So the longer you delay any additional capacity, the more pain and the higher the risks that there will be load shedding in the country, because we just do not have sufficient capacity at the moment.
All right. Well, Phillip Dukashe, let's leave that conversation there for the moment. We thank you very much for your time.